Imagine waking up tomorrow with no job to go to, no tasks assigned, no boss, no schedule. Not because you were fired, but because the concept of work itself didn't exist. What would you actually do all day? For roughly 300,000 years, 95% of our species' existence, humans lived without anything resembling modern work. No employment, no wages, no 9 to 5. So how did they spend their time, and why did that all change? To understand what humans did before work, we need to travel back to a world without farms, without cities, without bosses. A world where survival didn't mean sitting at a desk or clocking in. It meant something radically different. Our ancestors were hunter-gatherers. They moved in small bands of 20 to 50 people, following seasonal food sources. No permanent homes, no stored wealth, no institutions. Just humans, nature, and the skills passed down through generations. But here's the puzzle that anthropologists struggled with for decades. If these people had no agriculture and no technology, they must have spent every waking hour desperately searching for food, right? Constantly on the edge of starvation? Wrong. When researchers in the 19 cities actually studied remaining hunter-gatherer groups like the Kung-san people of southern Africa, they discovered something that shattered assumptions. These people worked far less than modern humans. The Kung spent roughly 12 to 15 hours per week securing food. Not per day, per week. That's about 2 to 3 hours daily. The rest of their time was spent on what we'd call leisure, socializing, playing, resting, and storytelling. Anthropologist Marshall Salins called them the original affluent society. Not because they had much, but because they wanted little. Their needs were met with minimal effort, leaving them with something modern workers desperately lack: free time. So what did a typical day look like? A hunter-gatherer might wake at dawn, not to an alarm, but to natural light. There was no rush. Perhaps someone would head out to gather roots, berries, or nuts from familiar spots. Gathering was often done by women and provided the majority of calories, about 60 to 80%. It required deep knowledge of plants, seasons, and landscapes. But it wasn't grueling. A few hours of work could feed a family for days. Men typically hunted, though not every day. Hunting was risky, energy-intensive, and often unsuccessful. When it worked, it provided protein and fat. When it didn't, the group relied on gathered foods. There was no pressure to succeed daily. Whatever was caught or gathered was shared among the group. There was no concept of private property or hoarding. If you had food and your neighbor didn't, you shared. This wasn't charity, it was survival insurance. Today's hunter becomes tomorrow's gatherer. By midday, when the sun was hottest, most activity stopped. People rested in shade, napped, talked, or played games. Children ran freely, learning by watching adults. There were no lessons, no curriculum, just observation and imitation. Some time might be spent maintaining tools, sharpening a spear, crafting a basket, fixing a hide bag. These tasks were done socially, with conversation and laughter. Work and leisure blurred together. There was no separation between life and labor. Evenings were for community. Around fires, people shared stories, sang, danced, and passed down knowledge. These weren't just entertainment. They were education, history, and religion combined. Culture transmitted through voice and memory. Crucially, there were no permanent leaders. Decisions were made by consensus. Someone skilled at hunting might lead a hunt, but they had no authority over others afterward. Egalitarianism wasn't an ideal, it was the default. Don't mistake this for simplicity. Hunter-gatherers possessed encyclopedic knowledge of their environment. Hundreds of plant species, animal behaviors, weather patterns, navigation by stars. Their intelligence was every bit as sharp as ours, just applied differently. Their secret weapon was mobility. If resources depleted or conflicts arose, they simply moved. No mortgages, no property to defend, no investments to protect. This flexibility made them resilient in ways settled people never could be. This way of life persisted for millennia. Then, starting about 12,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent, something revolutionary happened. Humans began to farm. And with farming came the invention of work. The Neolithic Revolution, as it's called, wasn't a sudden event but a gradual shift. People began planting seeds, domesticating animals, and staying in one place. It sounds like progress. In many ways, it was, but it came with hidden costs. Farming produced more food per acre than foraging, allowing populations to grow, but it required constant labor: plowing, planting, weeding, harvesting, storing. For the first time, humans had to work harder to eat. The leisure vanished. Sedentism, staying in one place, created property. Land, homes, stored grain, and property needed protection. Social hierarchies emerged: chiefs, priests, eventually kings. Inequality, unknown among foragers, became the norm. Living close together and near animals bred new diseases. Skeletons from early farming communities show more malnutrition, dental problems, and shorter stature than their forager ancestors. Health declined even as food production increased. Once you start farming, you can't easily stop. Larger populations depend on harvests. Bad years mean famine. You're locked in. Anthropologists call this the trap of agriculture. It feeds more people but enslaves them to the land. But farming created surplus, and surplus enabled specialization. Not everyone had to grow food. Some became potters, weavers, soldiers, priests. Civilization emerged. Cities, writing, art, science, all built on agricultural surplus and organized labor. Over centuries, work transformed from something you did to something you were. Farmer, blacksmith, merchant, your occupation became your identity. The question shifted from what do you need to who are you in the economic system? Fast forward to the Industrial Revolution. Factories demanded even more: fixed hours, repetitive tasks, wage labor. Work became separate from life. You sold your time to an employer. The remnants of hunter-gatherer freedom evaporated completely. Today, the average full-time worker spends 40 to 50 hours weekly on the job, plus commuting. Far more than any hunter-gatherer. We're more productive than ever, yet we have less leisure. How did we end up here? Technology was supposed to free us. Computers, automation, efficiency gains, all promised more leisure. Instead, we work as much or more. The surplus doesn't go to workers' free time. It goes to economic growth and corporate profit. Hunter-gatherers had autonomy, equality, and time. We have technology, medicine, and comfort. It's not a simple trade-off. But recognizing what was lost helps us ask, is this the only way to organize human life? A handful of hunter-gatherer societies still exist. Though pressured by modernity, they remind us that our way isn't universal. For most of human history, people lived without jobs, without wealth accumulation, without the concept of career. Some researchers argue we're biologically adapted for hunter-gatherer life, not modern work. Our stress, our sedentary habits, our social isolation, these may be mismatches between our evolved nature and our invented world. Today, movements for shorter work weeks, universal basic income, and work-life balance echo ancient patterns. They ask, if we're so productive, why are we so busy? Could we reclaim some of that lost time? We can't return to prehistory. 8 billion people can't live as foragers. Agriculture and work are here to stay. But understanding our past challenges, the assumption that endless work is natural or inevitable. The question isn't whether to work, but how much and why. Hunter-gatherers worked to live. Somewhere along the way, we began living to work. Recognizing that shift is the first step toward changing it. Our ancestors had freedom we've traded for security and comfort. They had time we've traded for wealth and technology. Neither life is perfect. But only by understanding both can we design a future that combines the best of each. Perhaps the measure of progress isn't how much we produce, but how much we flourish. Not how busy we are, but how free. Not what we own, but how we live. So what did humans do before work was invented? They lived. They connected. They explored, played, rested, and created. They were fully human without being fully employed. And perhaps that's the most radical idea of all. The story of work isn't finished. Every system we've built, we can rebuild. Every norm we've accepted, we can question. The next chapter of human labor hasn't been written yet. And maybe, just maybe, it'll look more like our distant past than we think. If you could redesign your relationship with work from scratch, knowing what hunter-gatherers knew, what would you keep? What would you discard? That's not a hypothetical question. It's the challenge of our generation. Thanks for watching.